My wife's closest friend outlived her. Now she's asking to give a speech at the funeral. My wife's closest pal ended up being the death of her, and now that woman wants to stand up and talk at her funeral like nothing's wrong. Can you believe that? Me and my wife, we had our little girl back in December last year, and it wasn't an easy time. Let me tell you, the birth was rough, and afterward my wife started battling postpartum depression, which hit her hard. She'd planned to head back to her job after the baby came, but she was struggling so much we figured it'd be best to hold off until our daughter turned 1, then see where we stood, so she started seeing a therapist every week to help her through it. With her staying home full-time, I had to pick up extra hours at work, something we'd hashed out together beforehand, and she was on board with it from the jump. Then a few weeks back, my boss came to me with this big project, tons of overtime crammed into a short stretch, but it'd mean good money and a boost for my career, so I sat down with my wife, we talked it over, and she gave me the green light to take it on. For those 4 weeks, my mother-in-law and my wife's best friend, Jessie, were gonna pitch in with stuff I usually handle. Jessie's a stay-at-home mom with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old of her own, and she'd swing by during the day to keep an eye on the kids alongside my wife. 3 weeks into this grind, it hit me that we'd need a couple more weeks to wrap it up, so I went home that night, told my wife, and she said she was fine with it, but then she turned real distant over the next few days, not her usual self lately, so I didn't dwell on it too much, just tried not to let it get under my skin. Then, during that final week of the project, I rolled in one night and saw Jessie still hanging around the house, didn't think twice about it, said hey to her and my wife, and started heading to check on my little girl, but before I got to her room, I caught Jessie muttering something like, "He doesn't even bother saying hi to you proper, that's a dead giveaway." I spun around and asked her what she meant by that, and right then my wife burst into tears while Jessie started throwing wild accusations, saying I was stepping out on my wife. She claimed I must hate her because of her postpartum depression and that I wasn't into her anymore since she'd put on some weight after the baby, which was pure nonsense. I was doing everything I could to support my wife through that darkness, and to me, she looked just as beautiful as ever. She just wasn't up for getting close physically, and I wasn't about to force her into anything. Jessie demanded to see my phone, and I told her no way. She said that proved I was hiding something, but I turned to my wife and said I'd let her look if she wanted. She nodded, and man, that crushed me inside, knowing she might actually think I'd cheat after all we'd been through together. She scrolled through it, found nothing, but Jessie kept at it, saying I must have wiped the proof clean. She started yelling, woke up our daughter, so I told her to get out of my house. She finally left, and I went to settle our girl back down since my wife was still on the couch, sobbing. Once our daughter was sleeping again, I sat with my wife and tried to figure out what was going on. She admitted she'd been fretting ever since I took on all that overtime. I reminded her we'd agreed it was a solid chance for us, and she'd been okay with it. She said it was fishy that the project stretched longer, but I told her that's just how it goes sometimes. She wanted more proof, so I pulled up work messages, emails with timestamps, and pay records showing the overtime. She said she trusted me, apologized for doubting me, and told me Jessie had been feeding her this line about all these signs I was cheating. I asked why she'd buy into Jessie over me, why she didn't just talk to me about it, but she didn't have much to say. A couple weeks later, the project wrapped up. I even cut back my hours a bit from before, trying to be home more with my wife and daughter, but I was wiped out from juggling everything, and deep down I started resenting her for not trusting me. I brought it up a few times, but she'd brush it off, saying she was too tired or sad to deal with it. I tried to respect how she felt, but it left me wondering if my own feelings even mattered. So a few days later, I told her I was gonna find a therapist for myself, not tying it to her suspicions, just saying I was struggling and needed help. She shrugged and said, do what I gotta do. The next day, I got home from work, and our bedroom and my office were trashed, stuff torn up, papers all over, a total mess. My wife wasn't around, but our daughter was in her room crying, left alone. Her phone was off, so I called my in-laws and some buddies, but nobody knew where she was. I was getting scared, so I rang my mom to see if she could watch my girl while I went looking. Before my mom got there, my wife pulled up with Jessie driving. Jessie didn't come inside, but my wife did, all shaken up and teary. I asked what happened, thinking maybe we'd been robbed, but she started screaming that I was cheating and that therapy was just a cover to see some other woman. I tried calming her down, telling her that wasn't true, but she lunged at me and clocked me right in the face, busting my nose. When she saw the damage, she just plopped on the couch, zoned out, staring at nothing. I grabbed my daughter, locked us in her room, called my mom to update her, and rang my mother-in-law to come handle my wife. I packed a bag for my girl, and when my mom arrived, we took off. My wife didn't even glance up. We dropped my daughter with my dad, then hit urgent care for my nose, bleeding all over my mom's brand new Subaru. After that, Me and my daughter crashed with my folks, while my wife stayed with her parents. I started looking into a restraining order against Jessie and even thought about splitting from my wife. I loved her, but I couldn't stay with someone who'd hurt me and might hurt our girl. I wasn't ready for divorce, hoping she'd get help and we could fix things. Her folks said they were checking out inpatient care at a hospital nearby. Then, that next Sunday night, she showed up at my parents' place, demanding I hand over our daughter since she'd left her alone for hours last time and got violent with me. I said no, but offered to let her come in and visit with us all there. She refused, just wanted to take her, got mad, and eventually left. A few hours later, she smashed her parents' car into a tree and didn't make it. She passed away early Monday morning, convinced by Jessie I was cheating when I wasn't, and it broke her mind. Till it killed her. Yesterday, Jessie came by to see me and my daughter. After some crying, she said she's gonna speak at my wife's funeral. Already got the okay from my in-laws, just giving me a heads up out of courtesy. I told her she's not speaking. We argued, and she stormed off, calling me a jerk, saying I'm not the only one who loved my wife. I talked to my in-laws, who were dead set on letting Jessie talk. They've known her since she and my wife were little, and they're tight with her. We're all a wreck right now. And I'm worried pushing this'll wreck things with my in-laws, which I don't want, but picturing Jessie up there at the funeral makes my stomach turn. I can't stand the thought of hearing her, knowing she egged my wife on when she was falling apart and drove her off, leaving my daughter alone. Still, I don't trust myself to think straight with all this grief, guilt, and fear clouding my head. My folks are torn on what I should do, and I'm too drained to call up my friends for advice.